Welcome to Revolution Chronicles. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more forgotten tales of history. In 1850, Alabama, a chilling mystery began. One by one, the Ellison daughters vanished, each on her 16th birthday. What happened inside that quiet farmhouse would become one of the most unsettling legends in American history. Alabama, 1850. The countryside was quiet then, marked by rolling fields, oak-lined dirt roads, and the sound of cicadas in the long summers. Families were bound by tradition, by church, and by land. Most households kept to themselves, yet every family carried stories, some whispered, some never told at all. Among those stories, few were as chilling as the tale of the Ellison family. The Ellisons lived on the edge of a small settlement near the Alabama River, in a weathered wooden house that stood like a sentinel on the rise of a hill. By all appearances, they were ordinary folk. Thomas Ellison, the father, was a stern man of Scottish descent, his skin sun-darkened from years of fieldwork, his hands rough and cracked. His wife, Mary, was a gentle woman, soft-spoken and devoted to her children. Together, they had 3 daughters, and from the start, people said the girls were beautiful in a way that seemed almost otherworldly. Long dark hair, pale faces that glowed in the candlelight, and eyes that lingered on you longer than expected. Neighbors admired them, yet felt uneasy, as though there was something not quite explainable about the Ellison girls. Beauty of that kind in those days was not always considered a blessing. In rural communities, superstition traveled as fast as gossip. Folks wondered aloud whether beauty like that came with a price. The first to vanish was Clara, the eldest daughter. She had been bright, lively, and full of a soft kindness that drew others to her. On the day of her 16th birthday, the Ellison home had been full of joy. Mary baked a simple cake, sweetened with molasses, and Thomas allowed music in the parlor, something he rarely permitted. Neighbors were invited, and the evening stretched on with laughter, fiddle music, and the stamping of feet on wooden floors. But when the lanterns were blown out and the house grew still, something happened that would forever haunt the Ellisons. Clara was gone by morning. Her bed was neatly made, as though she had risen quietly in the night. The window stood open, though the family swore it had been locked. No footprints were found in the soft earth outside, no torn fabric caught on nails, no signs of struggle. It was as if she had stepped out of the world itself. The family searched the woods. Neighbors joined in, combing through thickets and calling her name until their voices cracked. The river was dragged, wells were checked, barns and cellars were searched. Nothing. Not a single trace. The local sheriff, a man named Robert Harlan, wrote in his ledger that Clara Ellison was lost, whereabouts unknown. That was all he could say. There was no evidence of kidnapping, no proof of foul play. In the absence of answers, rumors grew. Some said she had run away with a secret suitor. Others whispered darker things, that she had been taken by spirits, or perhaps claimed by the devil himself. Mary Ellison fell into despair, often wandering the fields calling for her daughter, her voice thin in the night air. Thomas grew more withdrawn, burying himself in labor, trying to beat grief into silence with his axe and plow. Their 2 younger daughters, Sarah and Abigail, grew up in the shadow of their sister's absence. 3 years later, on the eve of Sarah's 16th birthday, the Ellisons tried to quiet their fears. They told themselves Clara's disappearance had been a cruel twist of fate, a singular tragedy that would not repeat. Life had to move on. Sarah was quieter than Clara had been, more reserved, though with the same striking beauty. On her birthday, the family kept the celebration small, afraid of attracting attention. They prayed before bed, as if prayer might keep evil at bay. But by morning, Sarah too was gone. The pattern was unmistakable now, though few dared speak it aloud. The second daughter had vanished in the same way as the first, no signs of struggle. No footprints, no note. Just an open window, swaying curtains, and silence. This time, the community's fear grew. Families whispered about curses, about the sins of ancestors that could mark children generations later. Some muttered that Thomas must have made a dark bargain long ago. A trade sealed in secret, now being collected one daughter at a time. The sheriff searched again. The town preacher held a special sermon, urging the people to resist superstition. Yet even his voice shook when he spoke. Mary's grief consumed her. She became frail, often sitting by the girls' empty beds, rocking back and forth as though trying to will them back. Abigail, the youngest, was left in a cloud of dread. She was barely 13 when Sarah vanished, and she knew, as everyone knew, that her 16th birthday loomed like a storm on the horizon. For 3 years, the Ellison home felt like a place, waiting for something dreadful. Neighbors avoided it. Travelers passing through whispered of it. Some children in the settlement even dared each other to sneak near the house at night, claiming they heard a girl's laughter from the upper windows. Though the house itself was still and dark by the spring of 1856. Abigail's 16th birthday was near. The air in the Ellison home was heavy, every sound sharper, every shadow longer. Mary tried to cling to her only remaining daughter, begging her never to leave her sight. Thomas grew more protective, setting traps around the house, keeping a rifle at his side, but fear does strange things to people. It gnaws at reason, feeds on silence, and makes the imagination run wild. Abigail was different from her sisters. She was restless, curious, her mind full of questions about the world beyond the farm. She had listened to whispers, to old tales of curses and secrets. And though she never spoke them aloud, she wondered if her family carried something they dared not confess. On the night before her 16th birthday, a storm rolled over the countryside. Rain battered the roof, thunder rattled the windows, and lightning carved the sky into pale, jagged lines. I remained inside the house. The Ellisons huddled close, the air thick with dread. When morning came, the storm had passed. But Abigail, like her sisters before her, was gone. The Ellisons' cries echoed down the dirt road, drawing neighbors once again. The sheriff returned, weary, his face drawn with fear. People no longer spoke of kidnappers or accidents. They spoke of curses, of deals with darkness, of something old and hidden in the soil of Alabama itself. 3 daughters, each gone on her 16th birthday. Each vanished without a trace. The Ellison name became a warning. Parents told their children to avoid the hill where the house stood, to never play near its fields, to never step near its porch. For the Ellisons were marked, and whatever haunted them might reach beyond their walls. Years passed, yet the story did not fade. It became a tale told in hushed voices around fires, a lesson wrapped in fear. Some swore that on certain nights, when the wind carried just right, you could hear the cries of girls drifting from the empty house, as if their voices were caught between worlds. Others claimed they saw pale figures at the windows, staring out at the fields as though waiting to be found. And so, the legend of the Ellison daughters took root in Alabama's soil, an unsolved mystery, a family's grief, and a story that still lingers like a shadow across time. The years following Abigail's disappearance left the Ellison household hollow. The once bustling farmhouse now stood as a shell, its windows dark, shutters loose, and its porch sagging under the weight of neglect. Mary Ellison seemed to shrink into herself, her body already frail, withered under grief. Neighbors recalled seeing her wander the fields in her nightdress at dawn, whispering her daughters' names, her arms stretched as if reaching for unseen hands. Thomas was different. Where Mary sank into sorrow, Thomas hardened. He carried himself like a man at war, not with neighbors or nature, but with something he could neither see nor fight. People in town said his eyes changed after Abigail vanished. Once stern, but Steady, they now carried a feverish gleam, as though he were haunted by something only he could sense. He was rarely seen in the daylight. Rumor held that he spent his nights in the woods with a lantern. Searching, always searching. The community around the Ellisons could not shake the story either. By then, it had spread beyond the small Alabama settlement, reaching towns up and down the river. Travelers carried it further still, until it became a tale passed along in hushed voices. The idea of 3 daughters vanishing on their 16th birthdays was too chilling to be ignored. It was a story that sounded like a warning. A curse woven into everyday life. There were those who believed something supernatural was at play. Old folk in the area whispered of spirits that lingered in the Alabama woods, remnants of older times before settlers carved farms into the land. Some said the Ellisons had built their home on cursed ground, disturbing something buried long ago. Others swore the daughters had been taken by river spirits, lured into the depths of the Alabama River and never returned. But there were also, Tay whispers rumors, that Thomas himself was not blameless. Some neighbors claimed he had made a secret bargain in his youth, a deal struck in desperation to secure land and fortune. The price of that bargain, they suggested, was his daughters. It was a chilling idea, yet it explained what could not otherwise be explained. For in that age, when science was distant and faith fierce, people sought patterns where reason failed. Sheriff Robert Harlan, though, never gave up his own search for truth. He had been a younger man when Clara disappeared, full of determination and authority. But by the time Abigail vanished, the sheriff was older. His beard grayed, his shoulders stooped. The Ellison mystery had followed him his whole career. And, in quiet moments, he confessed it weighed on him heavier than any crime or murder he'd ever investigated. Harlan returned again and again to the Ellison property in the years after Abigail's disappearance. He combed through the house with lantern light, staring at the windows, the floors, the beds where each girl had last lain. He walked the fields with dogs, though they found no sense to follow. He inspected the riverbanks, imagining footprints that never appeared. Each time he left, he shook his head, his eyes tired, as though the land itself was keeping its secret. By 1860, the Ellison farm was a place of silence. Mary Ellison passed away that winter, her body too weak to endure the years of grief. Her death was not sudden, but neighbors said her spirit had already been gone long before her body followed. At her funeral, the preacher spoke of a mother reunited with her daughters in heaven. Though many in the pews whispered if heaven had truly been where the girls had gone, Thomas Ellison stood over her grave, his face stone, his eyes unreadable. After the burial, he spoke little to anyone. He became a recluse, rarely leaving the farm. Children who dared to creep near the Ellison property claimed to see him sitting on the porch at dusk, rifle across his knees, staring out toward the tree line. He seemed less like a man and more like a guard, waiting for something to come out of the woods. And yet, strange things continued to happen around the property. Neighbors swore they heard singing late at night, soft voices carried on the wind. Others claimed they saw figures moving in the windows, though the house was dark and empty. A traveling preacher once stopped at the settlement and, after hearing the story, spent a night praying at the edge of the Ellison fields. In the morning, he left without a word, pale and shaken. Refusing to speak of what he had felt in those hours, the disappearances haunted not only the Ellisons, but also the community itself. Parents became fearful, watching their own daughters closely as they neared their 16th birthdays. Some refused to let their girls out of their sight after dusk. A few even moved away altogether, unwilling to raise children near such a cursed place. The story of the Ellison daughters became part of the settlement's identity. Newcomers were told of it within days of arrival, often by neighbors eager to warn them. The tale was passed down from elders to children, growing darker with each telling. Some said the girls still walked the woods, trapped between worlds. Others believed the devil himself had claimed them, one by one, on their birthdays, but not all dismissed the possibility of human hands. A few believed the sheriff's quiet suspicion that someone had taken the girls, someone clever enough to leave no trace. If so, that person had to be close, perhaps even someone within the community. Yet time passed, and no evidence ever surfaced. The Ellison case became a wound that never healed, a mystery that refused to fade. By the mid-1860s, the world beyond Alabama was changing. The Civil War swept through the South, leaving scars on the land and the people. Men went to fight. Many never returned. Farms burned, fields went fallow, and families were torn apart. But even in those desperate years, the Ellison legend remained alive, spoken of in camps and whispered on dark nights. Thomas Ellison, now an old man, lived alone on the hill. His farm was worn, his body bent, but his eyes were still sharp. Some said he had grown more eccentric, talking to the air as if answering unseen voices. Others claimed he wandered the woods at night, calling out names that no one dared repeat. Then, in 1867, another strange story emerged. A group of boys, no more than 12, had ventured too close to the Ellison property on a dare. They claimed to have seen Thomas standing in the doorway of the house, speaking to 3 shadowy figures inside. The boys swore the figures were girls, pale, silent, standing side by side. Frightened, they ran home, their story dismissed as childish imagination. But the details spread nonetheless, stirring the old fears once more. The Ellison mystery had, by then, become more than a tragedy. It was a ghost story, a legend, a part of Alabama's darker folklore. Yet for those who remembered the girls, their laughter, their faces, their absence, it was never just a tale. It was pain without closure, grief without rest. And for Thomas Ellison, it was a burden he carried alone until his death in 1871, when neighbors finally entered the house after his passing. They found it in disrepair, cluttered with old papers, broken furniture, and dust. But in the upstairs bedrooms, something sent shivers through even the bravest men. Each of the girls' rooms had been preserved exactly as it had been on their last night's beds, neatly made. Personal items carefully placed, windows locked tight. It was as if Thomas had been waiting for them to return, keeping their rooms untouched for decades. On one wall, it's carved faintly into the wood. They found words scratched deep by hand. "They will come back to me." The house was abandoned after that. No one wanted it. No one dared touch it. It stood empty, a decaying monument to a family lost, a curse unsolved, and a mystery that lingered in every whisper of wind through its broken shutters. Yet the story of the Ellison daughters did not die. With the house, it lived on in memory, in rumor, in the quiet dread that settled over the countryside whenever their names were spoken. And as the years turned into decades, the legend spread further, carried by travelers, retold by families, shaping itself into one of the most haunting mysteries of Alabama's past. After Thomas Ellison's death in 1871, the old farmhouse was left to rot. The boards began to curl under rain and sun, vines crept up its walls, and its roof sagged. Yet the house did not fade quietly into the landscape like other abandoned homesteads of its time. No, this house seemed to breathe with memory, and for those who lived nearby, it was a presence they could not ignore. Children were told to stay away, but children are curious by nature. They dared each other to climb its porch steps, to peer through its grimy windows, to shout into its empty halls. Most never made it far. They spoke of sudden chills, of a silence too deep, of the hair rising on their necks as if someone unseen was standing close behind. Some swore they heard footsteps upstairs when the rooms above were empty. Others said They saw a figure in the window, a girl in a faded dress watching them until they ran screaming back down the hill. As the decades passed, the Ellison story became part of Alabama's folklore. Travelers along the Alabama River carried the tale from town to town. Newspapers occasionally printed articles retelling the mystery, each with its own flourish. Some journalists insisted the disappearances had been the work of kidnappers or outlaws. Others leaned into the supernatural, painting the Ellison daughters as ghostly brides stolen by the devil. The further the story spread, the less it resembled fact. Yet in the community closest to the house, the memory of Clara, Sarah, and Abigail remained sharp and painful. The sheriff's old ledgers were still kept in the courthouse, each entry noting the strange absence of evidence, each page filled with his handwriting growing more desperate with every case. Locals would sometimes request to see them, running their fingers over the yellowed paper, searching for something the sheriff himself had missed. But there was nothing, just the official record of 3 vanished girls, and a mystery no man could untangle. By the late 1800s, the land around the Ellison home had changed hands several times, though no one stayed long. A family who tried to farm it in 1883 abandoned the house within months. They claimed the nights were unbearable, doors creaking open on their own, voices calling from upstairs, the sound of laughter echoing down the halls. The father of that family, a stern veteran of the war, swore that one evening he saw a girl's shadow cross the wall while every member of his household sat together in the parlor. He refused to remain another night. After that, no one attempted to live in the house again. It became a landmark of dread, a place children ran past on their way to school, and where travelers crossed themselves as they passed by on horseback. Yet it also drew the curious. In 1891, a group of men from Montgomery rode to the settlement to investigate the tale, calling themselves researchers of strange American occurrences. They carried notebooks, sketch pads, and measuring tools. They stayed 2 nights in the Ellison house. On the 3rd day, they left abruptly, refusing to explain why, their faces pale and their voices hushed. One of them left behind a journal that was later found by a local boy. Inside were scattered notes, most unreadable due to smudged ink and torn pages. But one entry, dated their 2nd night, read simply, "We heard them singing, 3 voices in harmony." It was the sound of girls, but the house was empty. Stories like that kept the legend alive into the new century. By 1900, the Ellison mystery was spoken of alongside other old American ghost stories. Folklorists collected it, ministers preached on it, and teachers used it as a cautionary tale about pride, sin, and secrets. But no explanation ever settled the matter. The story remained open-ended, like a wound that refused to close. Generations turned over, yet the whispers did not fade. The house itself became more fragile with time. Its porch slumped, its windows shattered, but still it stood. Locals said it refused to fall because something inside was holding it together, unwilling to let go. Children of the early 1900s played a cruel game. They would walk up to the Ellison house on a girl's 16th birthday, daring her to knock on the door. Some claimed if you knocked 3 times, the door would open just enough for a pale hand to reach out. None of those tales were ever proven, but they traveled quickly. Keeping the fear alive, the Ellison name itself had nearly vanished by then. With Thomas gone and his daughters lost, there were no direct heirs. A few distant relatives existed in other states, but they wanted nothing to do with the cursed property. The land became county property, though no one wanted to farm it. It was left to weeds, the house standing like a lonely gravestone for the family it had once sheltered. Still, the daughters themselves lived on in memory. Older townsfolk would speak of them in detail: Clara, the kind eldest; Sarah, the quiet middle child; Abigail, the curious youngest. They spoke of their smiles, their laughter, the way they played in the fields. These memories were offered with tenderness, but also with a shadow of fear. As though remembering them too fondly might call something forth by the 1920s. America was modernizing. Cars rolled down dirt roads, radios crackled with voices from afar, and cities grew restless with energy. Yet in the countryside, the Ellison legend remained rooted. Modernity did not erase it. In fact, the strangeness of the story seemed to grow sharper against the backdrop of progress. When newspapers occasionally revisited the tale, they framed it as a mystery unsolved by science. A reminder that not everything could be explained by reason and invention. During the Great Depression, drifters often camped in abandoned places, and some chose the Ellison house. A few of them told unsettling stories to locals in exchange for meals. Strange lights glowing in the rooms at night, the sound of girls weeping softly in the dark. One drifter interviewed years later swore that as he lay on the parlor floor, trying to sleep, he felt the unmistakable sensation of small hands pressing against his chest, as if children were trying to hold him down. He left before dawn, never returning. By mid-century, the house had become too dangerous to enter. Its floors gave way, its roof sagged, and its walls tilted. Yet people still visited it, teenagers seeking a thrill, researchers chasing folklore, even pastors seeking to banish what they called lingering evil. None succeeded in putting the story to rest. Every attempt to explain, to dismiss, to rationalize only seemed to deepen the mystery. For some, the Ellison story became less about the daughters themselves and more about what they represented. Innocence, stolen grief, unending, the terrifying possibility that some questions have no answers. For others, it was a cautionary tale, proof that families carry secrets heavier than stone. And for many in Alabama, it was simply a piece of their land's history, as much a part of the soil as the river and the trees. And so the story of the Ellison daughters endured long after their house began to crumble. Long after their names faded from family Bibles, long after anyone alive could remember their faces. The tale traveled through time, reshaped by each generation, yet always the same at its core. 3 daughters, 3 birthdays, 3 vanishings without a trace. But as the 20th century rolled forward, something else began to happen. New witnesses, new voices began to add to the story. And their accounts were stranger still. By the mid-1900s, the Ellison story was more legend than memory. But legends have a way of outliving stone and wood. The farmhouse still stood on its lonely hill, though barely. The roof had caved in at the center. Ivy wrapped itself around the chimney like a serpent, and floorboards sagged beneath the weight of years. Yet despite its ruin, the house refused to fall entirely, as if it clung to the earth with the same desperation the Ellisons themselves once clung to hope. In the 1950s, a local newspaper revived the mystery in a Sunday feature. The reporter framed it as a Halloween piece, listing the facts of the 3 vanished daughters, the grief of Mary, the obsession of Thomas, and the eerie reports that followed. It was intended as entertainment, but it reignited old fear. Older residents wrote letters to the paper, angry that their pain had been turned into a story for amusement. One woman, whose grandmother had grown up with Clara Ellison, wrote, "These were not ghosts or legends to us. They were girls we knew. We never found them, and our town never healed from that." Around that same time, ghost hunters and amateur historians began to appear, curious to see the house for themselves. Some brought cameras, others tape recorders, hoping to capture evidence of what lingered there. A few reported strange results photos with blurred shapes in the windows, recordings that carried faint whispers when played back. Whether real or imagined, their findings fueled new waves of fascination. But fascination was not without fear. Farmers who lived near the property complained of trespassers, and some admitted that even they avoided the hill after dark. One farmer, interviewed in 1963, said he once saw lights moving in the upstairs windows, soft, glowing, almost like lanterns, though the house had long been without electricity. He refused to pass near the property again. By the 1970s, the Ellison daughters' story had become part of the larger body of American folklore. It appeared in collections of ghost tales, was retold on radio shows, and even inspired a fictionalized novel that cast the girls as victims of a wandering stranger. Yet none of these retellings could match the raw grief that still clung to the real story. The truth that 3 young girls vanished without a trace was stranger and more haunting than any fiction. In the late 1980s, the county finally placed a sign at the edge of the property, warning trespassers of danger due to collapse. But the sign did little to keep people away. Teenagers still dared one another to approach. Travelers still pulled off the road to glimpse the ruin. Some left offerings, flowers, crosses, even birthday candles at the crumbling porch steps. The strangest accounts of that era came from those who claimed to have seen the daughters themselves. In 1991, a pair of hunters walking near the property swore they saw 3 girls in white dresses standing among the trees at dusk. The hunters called out, but the figures slipped away without a sound. When they searched the woods, they found no footprints in the soft ground. The men, hardened by years of hunting, refused to return to the area. A year later, a traveling couple camping by the river claimed they woke in the night to hear singing 3 voices, sweet and clear, drifting across the water. They searched the banks with flashlights, but the voices faded the closer they drew to the Ellison Hill. Some dismissed these stories as tricks of imagination, fueled by the legend itself. But for those who told them, the encounters were real, etched into memory with the same force as any hunting accident or brush with death. By the turn of the 21st century, the house was almost gone. The roof had collapsed entirely, most windows shattered, and vines had overtaken the walls. Yet the land remained untouched. No developer, no farmer, no family dared claim it. It was as if the soil itself carried a warning. Leave us be. Historians attempted to revisit the case with modern methods. Genealogists traced the Ellison family line, uncovering little beyond distant relatives who wanted nothing to do with the past. Archivists pored over Sheriff Harlan's ledgers, finding the same fruitless notes written in his heavy hand. Paranormal investigators arrived with infrared cameras and digital recorders, capturing orbs of light, sudden drops in temperature, and what some swore were faint female voices calling in the night. None of it explained what had happened. None of it brought closure, and yet the story continued to matter. For locals, it was more than a ghost tale. It was a piece of identity, a reminder of how grief can echo across generations. Families who had lived in the area for over a century spoke of the Ellison daughters with reverence, not as phantoms, but as lost children who had never been found. One elderly man, interviewed in 2003, put it simply, "Folks call them ghosts. But I think they were just girls taken too soon, and we keep telling their story so they don't vanish twice." Today, little remains of the Ellison house. A few beams jut from the ground like bones. The foundation lies sunken beneath weeds, and the chimney still stands stubbornly against wind and rain. The land is quiet, save for the rustle of leaves and the hum of insects. Yet those who visit say the silence feels heavy, as if holding something unspoken. The story of Clara, Sarah, and Abigail lives on, told around campfires, written in history blogs, shared on video channels like this one. For some, it is just a mystery. For others, it is a haunting. For the people who remember, it is sorrow without end. And perhaps that is why the Ellison daughters' tale endures. Not because of the fear it inspires, but because of the ache it leaves behind. 3 young girls, each on the brink of life, gone without a trace, leaving their family shattered and their community scarred. Their absence became larger than their presence ever was. Some mysteries fade with time. This one has not. It lingers in Alabama soil, in the whispers of old folks, in the broken stones of a farmhouse that will not fully fall. The Ellison daughters remain 16, forever missed, forever wondered about, forever half seen in the shifting shadows of history, and maybe when the wind is just right. When the moon shines across the Alabama River and the old hill stands dark. Against the night, you might hear a tooth-faint laughter of girls, carried on the breeze, waiting to be remembered.